She walked into the marina with her head held high, but just one glance at the simplest yacht in the showroom was enough for her to hear. "This isn't for you." The widow, with her simple clothes and country manners, was ridiculed in front of everyone. What the salespeople didn't know, sir, was that she owned acres of land, prize-winning cattle, and shares in companies they could only dream of visiting. Days later, the owner of the company himself knocked on her door, panicking, begging for forgiveness. Subscribe to our channel now and see how prejudice never stands up to the truth. The morning sun was already punishing the landscape of the Blue Ridge Mountains when Mrs. Eleanor Thompson parked her 15-year-old Ford pickup at the entrance of the luxurious Golden Harbor Marina in Charleston. The red dust from rural Virginia still covered the fenders, contrasting with the gleaming yachts and boats reflecting the sun from the bay. Adjusting the simple scarf that held back her gray hair, she took a deep breath, straightened her cotton, floral dress, and stepped out of the vehicle with the silent determination she had carried for decades. "Is Mr. Harrison in?" she asked the impeccably dressed receptionist, who examined her from head to toe with a polite but obviously forced smile. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" replied the young woman, typing distractedly on her computer without really paying attention. "No, honey, I came to see that big yacht over there." Eleanor pointed to the most imposing vessel in the showroom, a luxury model valued at millions of dollars. The receptionist raised her eyebrows and exchanged a quick glance with a passing salesman. The man, wearing an impeccable navy blue suit, approached with a commercial smile that didn't reach his eyes. "May I help you, ma'am?" "I want information about that yacht, the largest one in the display." The salesman, who introduced himself as Brian, looked at the old pickup parked outside and then at Eleanor's calloused hands. With a condescending tone, he explained, "That's our Poseidon 75 model, ma'am. It cost $12 million. Perhaps you might be interested in our more accessible models. We have smaller boats starting at $300,000. A discreet laugh came from another salesman watching the scene. Eleanor noticed but maintained her serene countenance. Her eyes, however, registered every detail, every look of disdain. "No, son, that's the one I'm interested in. Could you show it to me?" Brian cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, with all due respect, that yacht isn't, well, let's say it's not for every customer profile." He lowered his voice. "It's more for business people, celebrities." "This isn't for you," muttered another nearby employee, causing muffled laughter. Eleanor nodded calmly, her face not showing the hurt she felt. She took a pen from her worn leather purse and discreetly noted something in a small notebook. "I understand. Thank you very much for your attention." She turned around with dignity, but not before memorizing the name engraved in golden letters on the wall. Thomas Harrison, President. Driving back to the Blue Ridge, Eleanor drove in silence, her thoughts distant. The Sunrise Farm, inherited from her husband Robert after his sudden passing 12 years earlier, was all she had. A piece of land that many considered unproductive, surrounded by mountains and crystal-clear streams, where she grew a little coffee and raised some dairy cattle. What no one in Charleston knew was that 3 months earlier, Eleanor's life had completely changed. Returning to the farm, she stopped in front of the main house, a century-old building with thick walls and a wide porch. Her nephew Nathan, a 30-year-old man who helped her manage the property, came to meet her. "So, Aunt Ellie, how did it go at the marina?" Eleanor got out of the car, shaking her head. "As expected, son. They looked at me like I was an intruder." Nathan snorted with indignation. "If they only knew!" "But they don't, and it's better that way for now." She smiled serenely. "Our lawyers advise discretion until we close the main contracts." They entered the house together, where in the dining room a large table was covered with documents, maps, and reports. A middle-aged man wearing a button-up shirt and thin-framed glasses was examining some papers. "Mrs. Thompson, good to see you back," said Michael Reed, the geologist who had changed her life. "I just received the results from the latest analyses. The silicon concentration on your property is even greater than we initially imagined." She sat heavily in the solid wooden chair, the same one where Robert used to sit to do the farm accounts. "And that means... It means you're sitting on one of the largest high-purity silicon reserves in the country. With the growing demand for solar panels and electronic components, we're talking about a astronomical value. He hesitated, searching for words. Eleanor looked out the window at the mountains she had known since childhood. That land, which for years had given her nothing but work and worry, now revealed itself as a hidden treasure. "Are the companies still calling?" she asked Nathan. "Non-stop, Aunt Ellie. Technology giants from the United States, China, Europe, all wanting exclusivity. The biggest offer so far was $2 billion for just 30% of the exploitation rights." Michael adjusted his glasses, impressed by Eleanor's calmness. "Do you realize what this means? You can buy not just one yacht, but an entire fleet if you want." Eleanor smiled, thoughtful. The yacht was never a matter of ostentation. It was an old dream of hers and Robert's, who loved the sea but never had the chance to sail in deep waters. "It's not a question of being able to afford it, Michael. It's a question of respect." She took the small notebook from her purse where she had written something at the marina. "Call this lady, Nathan. Sarah Collins from Horizon Yachts in Beaufort. She was the only one who treated me like a person when I went there last week, even before knowing anything about the silicon." On the table, the phone started ringing once again. It was the 13th call that day. While Nathan answered, Eleanor picked up an old framed photo from the shelf. She and Robert, young, smiling, in front of a small rented boat during a trip to the Outer Banks. "One day, Ellie, we'll have our own boat and sail across this big world," he would always say. The phone was passed to her. The voice on the other end sounded anxious, almost desperate. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Thomas Harrison, owner of Golden Harbor Marina. I'd very much like to speak with you personally about a special offer." 3 days after Thomas Harrison's call, a convoy of luxury cars raised dust on the dirt road that snaked up to Sunrise Farm. Eleanor observed from the porch, sitting in her rocking chair, while calmly drinking coffee harvested and roasted right there. At her side, Mrs. Betty, who had taken care of the house for more than 30 years, shook her head in disapproval. "Are you really going to receive this man after what he did?" "Yes, Betty. My mother always said that it's in moments of power that a person's true character is revealed." The vehicles stopped in front of the century-old house. From the first car, a luxury armored SUV, stepped Thomas Harrison, a man in his early 50s, well-cut graying hair and a tailored Italian suit. His normally confident expression now showed concern and poorly disguised anxiety. Behind him, 3 assistants carried folders and an enormous bouquet of flowers. "Mrs. Eleanor Thompson?" Thomas forced a smile, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Eleanor greeted him with a nod without getting up. "You've been in my presence before, Mr. Harrison. You just didn't think it was worth getting to?" "Know me on that occasion." Thomas's smile faltered for a moment, but he recovered quickly. "Please accept my most sincere apologies for any misunderstanding that may have occurred at our establishment. If you'll allow me to explain..." "There was no misunderstanding, Mr. Harrison." Eleanor finally stood up, gesturing for him to follow her inside the house. "Come in." Betty prepared some country coffee and cornbread. The farm's living room was simple but welcoming. Solid wood furniture, some inherited from previous generations, family photographs on the walls, and a large window that framed the beauty of the Blue Ridge Mountains like a living painting. Nothing there suggested the owner's newly discovered fortune. "Beautiful property," commented Thomas, trying to break the ice as his assistants uncomfortably settled onto the rustic sofas. "It was my late husband's. He inherited it from his father, who inherited it from his grandfather. 4 generations working this land." Betty served coffee in old porcelain cups, while Nathan entered the room carrying some folders. Eleanor's nephew sat down next to his aunt, carefully observing the visitors. "Mrs. Thompson," Thomas began after a sip of coffee, "when I found out who you really are, I was, well, sincerely mortified by the treatment you received at our marina." "And how did you discover who I really am?" she asked with a penetrating look. Thomas swallowed hard. "The business world is small, ma'am. When news emerged about the silicon discovery on your property and the billion-dollar offers you're receiving," he hesitated. "Well, let's just say your name started circulating. in the highest business circles in the country. Eleanor smiled discreetly. Interesting how money changes people's perception, isn't it? Last week I was just an old countrywoman who didn't even deserve to enter your showroom. One of Thomas's assistants choked on his coffee while the businessman visibly paled. Ma'am, I came personally to offer not just my apologies, but exclusive conditions. He signaled, and one of the assistants opened a folder. We've prepared a special proposal for you. A substantial discount on the Poseidon 75 model, complete customization, lifetime maintenance included. Eleanor raised her hand, interrupting him. Mr. Harrison, do you think this is a matter of price? Silence took over the room. Even the birdsong outside seemed to have ceased. What do you mean? Asked Thomas, confused. I don't want a discount, I never did. If I decide to buy a yacht, I'll pay the fair price for it. She leaned back in her chair. What I want, what I've always wanted, was respect. Something that can't be bought or sold? Nathan smiled discreetly, proud of his aunt. But Mrs. Thompson, we're talking about a mistake made by employees who don't represent me. They've been properly warned. Thomas's tone suggested something more severe than a simple warning. Your employees represent your values, Mr. Harrison, and values are like tree roots. You don't see them, but they determine what grows above the ground. Thomas tried another approach. We're planning an exclusive event for our VIP clients next month. You would be our guest of honor. Thank you, but no. Eleanor rose calmly. I have other commitments. At that moment, the farm's phone rang. Betty answered and then passed the receiver to Eleanor. It's the lady from Horizon Yachts in Beaufort. Eleanor took the phone with a genuine smile. Hello, Sarah. Yes, I received the catalogs. Thank you very much. Yes, tomorrow at 10 o'clock is perfect. I'm looking forward to our meeting. When she hung up, she found Thomas Harrison staring at her fixedly, an expression of painful understanding on his face. You've already decided, haven't you? Yes, Mr. Harrison. I decided the moment I left your marina, after hearing your salesman say that this wasn't for me. Eleanor walked to a shelf and picked up a frame. In the photo, a middle-aged man smiled next to a small fishing boat. This was Robert, my husband. He worked from sunrise to sunset on this farm that barely paid the bills, but he had a dream to one day have his own boat to sail along the American coast. Her eyes watered. He passed before fulfilling that dream. I promised myself that one day I would do this for him. The businessman looked at the photo, suddenly aware of the humanity behind what he saw merely as a potentially lucrative business transaction. When I entered your marina, Mr. Harrison, I wasn't a rich farmer looking for a toy. I was a widow, trying to honor her husband's memory. She returned the photo to the shelf. Last week I visited 3 marinas. In 2 of them I was treated like someone who didn't belong. At Horizon Yachts, Sarah offered me water, showed me the models, patiently, answered my questions, even thinking I would never buy anything. She treated me like a human being, not as a potential customer. Thomas lowered his eyes, visibly embarrassed. I understand, and I respect your decision. Eleanor accompanied the businessman to the door. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the mountains with orange hues. You know, Mr. Harrison, I discovered that wealth is like water. It can bring life or it can drown. It depends on how you deal with it. When the convoy departed, raising another cloud of red dust, Nathan approached his aunt. Do you think he learned his lesson? Maybe, but it's not my responsibility to teach him, she smiled, looking at the mountainous horizon. Tomorrow we go to Beaufort. It's time to fulfill your Uncle Robert's dream. In Eleanor's bedroom on the dresser, there was a small carved wooden box that Robert had made years ago. Inside it, a yellowed magazine clipping showed a luxurious yacht sailing the sea. In the margin, handwritten in blue pen, it read, "One day, Ellie, one day." 6 months had passed since the meeting with Thomas Harrison. The small town of Blue Ridge had subtly changed. Helicopters occasionally flew over the region, imported cars crossed the central square, and executives in suits contrasted with the rural landscape as they stayed at the only local inn. Sunrise Farm, however, maintained its essence. Eleanor had refused to alter the century-old house, allowing only the construction of a modern office at the back of the property. where Nathan and a small team managed the family's growing business. On a sunny Saturday morning, Eleanor was doing her shopping at Joe's Market, as she had done for the past 40 years. "Mrs. Ellie, you could buy the entire supermarket now. Why do you still come here every week?" asked Joe as he weighed half a pound of cheese on the old scale. "And miss our conversations, Joe?" She smiled. "Besides, your cheese is the best in the region. No amount of money changes that." Joe wrapped the cheese in wax paper, as he had done since taking over the business from his father. "The whole town is talking about your yacht's inauguration next week. They say even the governor will show up." Eleanor sighed. She wanted something simple, intimate, but events had taken on proportions she could no longer control. "Is it true that you invited everyone in town?" "Of course, Joe, you're my family." She paid for her purchases. "And speaking of that, there's a special invitation for you and Martha at the farm. Nathan will stop by later to deliver it." As she left the market, Eleanor noticed a car parked across the street. She immediately recognized the driver, Michael Reed, the geologist who had discovered the silicon on her land. "Mrs. Thompson," he waved, approaching with a genuine smile. "I came to personally bring you the latest updates. The analyses confirmed we have enough silicon to supply the solar panel industry for at least 20 years. They walked together through the central square, where children played under the shade of century-old trees. "And how are the negotiations with the technology companies?" she asked. "Excellent. The sustainable exploitation model you demanded has attracted even more interested parties. 3 multinationals have already signed preliminary contracts, and the requirement to build a factory here in the region will transform the local economy." Eleanor smiled, satisfied. From the beginning, she had made it clear the silicon exploitation should benefit the community. Jobs, technical schools, a modern hospital, everything was in the contracts. And that solar energy startup, Solar America. Surprisingly, they managed to gather the investments. You were very generous in granting them special conditions. They were the only Americans among those interested. We need to believe in our own people, Michael. Upon arriving at the farm, they found unusual activity. Nathan was coordinating some employees who were unloading sound and lighting equipment for the yacht's inauguration party. "Aunt Ellie," he ran to Eleanor. "They called from the shipyard. The Roberts Dream is ready. They want to know if we can go to Beaufort tomorrow for a final inspection before the official delivery." Eleanor's eyes sparkled. The name chosen for the yacht was a tribute to her husband, but it also represented the fulfillment of a shared dream. "Nathan, call Sarah and confirm, and ask them to prepare that special champagne we ordered from France." At night, alone in her room, Eleanor opened once more the small carved wooden box. Besides the magazine clipping, there were now the final designs of the yacht. 75 feet of pure luxury, but with touches that recalled her and Robert's simple origins. The deck wood came from certified reforestation. The energy systems were partially solar, using panels produced with silicon from the farm itself, and decoration details included elements of Virginia culture. The next day, upon arriving at Horizon Yachts in Beaufort, Eleanor was greeted by Sarah Collins with the same respect and friendliness as on her first visit months earlier. "Mrs. Thompson." Sarah hugged her warmly. "Everything is ready exactly as you dreamed." The yacht was magnificent. Anchored at the main pier, it stood out among the other vessels. Eleanor boarded with a racing heart, touring each area with contained emotion. The main cabin had been decorated with photographs of her and Robert, and in the main salon, a carved wooden plaque displayed the words, "One day, Ellie, one day." "It's perfect," she whispered, moved. Sarah smiled, proud. "You know, Mrs. Thompson, when you first entered our shipyard, I saw something in your eyes that many rich clients don't have: purpose. You didn't want a yacht to show off, but to honor a promise." As they talked, a commotion formed at the entrance of the shipyard. Thomas Harrison, accompanied by reporters and photographers, was hurriedly approaching the pier. "Mrs. Thompson," he called, breathless. "What a coincidence to find you here." Sarah frowned, clearly bothered by the interruption. "It's no coincidence, Mr. Harrison," Eleanor calmly replied. "You knew very well I would be here today." Camera flashes fired incessantly. Thomas smiled for the photographers, strategically positioning himself next to Eleanor. "I came to personally congratulate you on your magnificent yacht. By the way, I also brought an invitation to the launch of our new model. You would be our guest of honor." Eleanor looked at Sarah, who was disguising a smile. Then, with serenity, she turned to the reporters. "Gentlemen, allow me to clarify something. Horizon Yachts was chosen to build Robert's dream, not for the price or technical conditions, although both are excellent." She paused. "It was chosen because when I was just a widow from the countryside with no apparent name or fortune, I was treated here with dignity. Respect should not depend on the size of one's bank account." The reporters were frantically taking notes, while Thomas paled. "As for your invitation, Mr. Harrison," she continued, "I'm afraid I'll have to decline. I'll be busy that day, sailing along the American coast, fulfilling my husband's dream." The scene was published in all the major newspapers in the country the next day. The nautical market, traditionally elitist, was shaken by the story of the Silicon Widow, as the press had nicknamed her. In the following months, Horizon Yachts saw its sales triple, while Golden Harbor faced an image crisis. On the morning of the official inauguration, the small port of Beaufort was packed. Blue Ridge residents arrived in a caravan, led by Joe and Betty. Technology company executives mingled with local farmers and merchants, creating an unusually democratic atmosphere. When Eleanor took the stage for the ceremony, the silence was immediate. She wore an elegant navy blue suit, but kept on her feet the same comfortable boots she wore on the farm. "I'm not good with speeches," she began with her serene voice, "so I'll be brief. This yacht is not just a dream fulfilled, but a lesson I learned from my husband, Robert. The true value of something is not in its price, but in the meaning we give to it." She paused, looking at the familiar faces in the audience. "Many ask me why I continue living on the farm, shopping at the small market, attending the same church. The answer is simple, because that's where my essence is. The discovery of silicon changed my financial situation, but I decided it wouldn't change who I am." Spontaneous applause interrupted her speech. When she resumed, her eyes shone with emotion. Robert's dream will always be available for children from the Blue Ridge Municipal School to take educational trips, and part of the profits from the silicon exploitation will be allocated to a fund for environmental preservation of the Blue Ridge Mountains. More applause, now accompanied by tears on many faces. "Finally, I want to especially thank someone who is no longer among us, but who taught me the value of perseverance." She looked to the sky. "Robert, my old man, we did it. Our one day has finally arrived." The French champagne popped against the yacht's hull, while the local band played a Virginia song. Eleanor, surrounded by friends and neighbors of a lifetime, smiled serenely. Among the guests, discreetly positioned at the back, was Thomas Harrison. When their gazes crossed, Eleanor greeted him with a slight nod. He returned it with a respect that didn't exist months before. That same night, under a starry summer sky, Robert's dream left the port of Beaufort for its inaugural voyage. At the helm was Eleanor, who had insisted on learning basic navigation, assisted by a professional captain. As the lights of the coast diminished in the distance, she breathed deeply the sea air, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. "Look, Robert," she whispered to the wind, "we're sailing, my old man. We're finally sailing." 1 year after the inauguration of Robert's dream, Sunrise Farm had transformed into a center for sustainable innovation. The solar panel factory already employed more than 200 local residents, and the technical school was graduating its first class of young specialists in renewable energy. Eleanor, now nationally known as a symbol of business integrity, continued living in the century-old house, shopping at Joe's Market, and participating in community festivals. Her only concession to her new status was the monthly trip she took with the yacht, always inviting different families from the region to accompany her. On a Sunday afternoon, as Robert's dream sailed near the Outer Banks, Nathan found his aunt at the bow contemplating the horizon. "A penny for your thoughts, Aunt Ellie." Eleanor smiled. I was thinking about how life comes full circle, son. A year ago, I was humiliated at that marina. Today, I'm invited to give lectures on business ethics. You've changed a lot of things, you know. That report about your story inspired a national movement for more respectful service in luxury commerce. She laughed softly. That wasn't my intention. I just wanted to fulfill your uncle's dream. At that moment, Sarah approached with a glass of champagne. Mrs. Thompson, there's a call for you. It's Thomas Harrison. Eleanor took the phone, curious. Hello? Mrs. Thompson. Thomas's voice sounded different, more humble. I'm calling to inform you that following your example, we've implemented a new training program in our company. All employees now go through workshops on humanized service, regardless of the customer's appearance or financial condition. I'm your. Happy to hear that, Mr. Harrison. And also, he hesitated, I'd like to invite you to be the godmother of our new social project, school boats for underprivileged children along the coast. Eleanor was silent for a few moments, observing the blue sea stretching before her. I accept your invitation, Mr. Harrison, with one condition, that the first boat be built by Horizon Yachts. She could almost feel the smile on the other end of the line. Deal, and thank you for the most valuable lesson I've received in 30 years of business. As she hung up, Eleanor turned her gaze to the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Nathan and Sarah respected her moment of contemplation. You know, Nathan, she finally said, your Uncle Robert always said that a human being's greatest wealth is not what they have, but what they represent. The yacht continued smoothly through the calm waters of the bay, carrying not just people, but also dreams, memories, and values that, like the horizon itself, seemed endless. Dear listeners, we hope that Mrs. Thompson's story has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of emotions and discoveries, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about ordinary people who transform adversity into triumph. Find it here by clicking on the left. If you enjoyed this narrative about respect, dignity, and fulfilled dreams, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of American life, with authentic characters who speak directly to our souls. What moment most moved you in this story? The humiliation at the marina, Thomas's visit to the farm, or perhaps the inauguration of Robert's dream? Share with us in the comments, and also tell us if you've ever experienced a situation where you were judged by your appearance. We look forward to reading your experiences, and we'll meet again tomorrow with another touching story that will warm your heart and nourish your soul.